MBA. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do is I wanted to start, because we obviously through our curriculum, they learn about machine learning, artificial intelligence, all this stuff, right? And data, and we play with it on our local computers. But in reality, right, the amount of, when we're talking about data science, we're always talking about massive amount of data that just can't be done on a local computer. And I always wanted to create a project, or I wanted to work on a project with students where they get to actually build, in our case, a dashboard, right? Because if you think about the business world, everything is dashboards, interactive dashboards. Everything is moving from actual PDFs being, I mean, the first generation of reporting was PDFs, right? But now in corporate America, the next evolution is, okay, let's have interactive data. And if you want interactive dashboards that you can connect with online, everybody can go in, log in, see what's going on. It's a game changer in terms of having to process different PDFs. More importantly, it becomes more personalized, the reporting in the financial sector, investment sector, et cetera, et cetera. So this involved obviously data, HTML, all that other stuff, things that we typically don't teach in the business school level. So my first question was, all right, can this be taught to MBA, MIT students? Because one, you have to learn that, you have to learn the HTML. We teach in Python, so we could extend off to Python. So that's why I wanted to go firstly, I want to do it in Python. If you're wondering why I chose Python as a language, it's because we teach R, Python, SQL. So Python was the way to go, because in R, I think it's done through something called, RStudio has a concept called Shiny, R Shiny web servers, right? And so the first question was, all right, can we teach HTML, CSS? I think it's possible, right? It's not too much of a stretch. But okay, what web framework do we teach them? The question is, okay, it's the most popular one, web framework. There's obviously Django for full-on web applications, and then there's smaller and more lighter Flask. But when you research Flask, the people that are developing behind Flask, actually, that originally were on the project, say now, no, don't use Flask anymore. Use Fast API, which is a synchronous server, right? Synchronous, where you can do synchronous style programming. It makes the programming much faster, apparently. So because the industry is headed that way, and if I'm going to be doing web application development, I'll probably be doing a Fast API anyway. I said, you know what? Let me teach the students in the right. We'll start off on the right foot. Let's use Fast API, right? It seems relatively easier, or more. I feel more straightforward also than Flask a little bit. I definitely is. Now that I work with it, I think Fast API is fantastic. But then there was the other question: where do we store it? How do we put this up on the web, right? And what happened was I stumbled upon one of your articles, I think Abdulaziz, your articles on Fast API. I was like, what companies host Fast API? And I saw your article, I was like, oh. And I looked at, I checked you guys out. I saw you guys are, a new startup coming up from Y Combinator, and your whole shtick was making the infrastructure as easy as possible. And that's where I was like, yes, that's what I need. It was for developers as easy as possible, but my question was, can I do this for MBAs and master students, right? So, long story short, I think my students, getting feedback from my students, they loved it. They actually, I have to actually produce more material. We have to do a little bit more. Even though the semester ended, they want to do more and see more, right? With their free Okteto accounts, what more they can do, and they want to learn more. And I think it's strongly possible, and I have to give credit to you guys, that I think the way you set it up, it's so that I think you've crossed the threshold, my opinion, you crossed the threshold from Okteto being for developers that don't want to care about infrastructure. But more importantly, the business side, or business analysts, data analysts that don't want to care about infrastructure, right? I think if I got it, I didn't know this world of Kubernetes. Am I even saying that right? Is it Kubernetes? Is that how you say the term right? I had no idea about Docker files, all this stuff. I'm like, what is this, right? And slowly I was talking to my buddies who are on the IT side, who are network engineers, and they were telling me Kubernetes, it's all the rage now. It totally modularizes. He was giving me a whole spiel about the architecture, which I'm sure you and your audience all knows about, right? How it's all changing. It's more modularized, right? All this other stuff. So this is all new to us. Frankly, from our side, from business side, we don't care about this stuff. But what we do care about is what you provide. What Okteto really provided is, all we had to really worry about was the Docker file. Once we got that concept, okay, the Docker file has to be seen. And then I think the game changer really is the Okteto stack file you do. I'm not, I had to look up and see what, Ramiro, I looked up the stuff you did. You had a database tutorial. I checked that out. Abdulaziz, I checked out your stuff also. So I tossed some of your stuff, and it worked like gangbusters for us, right? And I basically said, guys, this is what we need. This is why we need it. We set up our configuration files, and everybody was off to the races, right? Doing the programming. And we set it up. I mean, so our setup was very straightforward. So we're using Python, we're using Fast API, right? Obviously HTML, CSS. We used your Postgre database, all right? And with the Postgre database, we downloaded a free IDE, because again, these are business students, right? So we love IDEs as much as possible. So we use there's a free Postgre IDE database called dbeaver. So once you showed us the command of connecting, sending the connections from Okteto to our local machine, we just simply open up that IDE, and it's, again, so straightforward and easy for these MBA students to create the tables, load up massive amount of data directly through this IDE, and it's all happening in the cloud in Okteto. So when that was, by the way, I loved it when the MBA students, some of the MBA students, like that light turned on. They're like, wait a minute, I did this on my machine, but it's now in the cloud in Okteto. I'm like, yeah, that's the point, guys, right? That's the point. And now you have, then if you get the commercial account, sky's the limit on the database. Now you're no longer constrained by your local computers. And they understood, they got it, right? That's why the cloud is so big, where they're working and all this other stuff. I mean, that's the whole point, right? For the students that haven't been working on the cloud yet at their work or internships. And so it blew their mind how they could do it. And again, the ease of it was just fantastic, right? It was just fantastic how easy it was. And so, I mean, in the first couple of times they had some errors, obviously, with the stack file and the whole process of waking up Okteto, doing it in their development environment, loading up to GitHub, and then from GitHub to the production. But after 2 or 3 times, we did a couple iterations. It was very smooth. It was like, it was automatic for them. It was automatic. And for me, I mean, I've worked on with different companies, I have different websites over that I want to move over now to Okteto for the developer account. Thank you, by the way, Ramiro. I could not believe, at first I was like, because this is very different. But once you get it, when you get the ecosystem, I totally understood where you're coming from now, right? I totally understand how you're trying to make this so painless and so seamless, right, for the developers. Because I'm technically, you can consider me a developer, even though I'm a quant developer, right? So even though I don't know the architecture stuff, so I'm green in that stuff. But for me, I didn't need to know that stuff, and boom, I did it. And all I had to do was show my MBA students and my master students, hey, this is how you do the configuration files, and you're good to go. Boom, they're done. Including on top of that, we were using the SQL. I mean, we could use anything because the way it's set up. So we use SQL Alchemy. Instead of directly doing SQL commands between our Fast API and the database, we use SQL Alchemy, because that tends to be more of a standard for web applications, because you have that object abstraction, right? If you want to use different kind of databases, your standard SQL databases or object-oriented databases, it perfectly abstracts it away. It also helps in terms of basic defenses against hackers if they try to do SQL injection or anything like that. So we did that. We had the SQL Alchemy objects. The SQL Alchemy objects totally align perfectly with the Postgre database, right? Completely seamless. And my MBA, my master's students, and then I got feedback from them. I'm like, listen, how did you like the class? They loved the class. I was like, how did you like it working Okteto? They're like, Okteto is awesome. I had some students that had some experience working with AWS. I don't know if I'm allowed to say names here. Sorry. Right? And they said, oh, this is so much simpler and easier, right, than what we're doing there. They tried to do less on that than they did in Okteto, and they couldn't believe how simpler, once we get those configuration files going, how much simpler it was. So it was just brilliant. That was my experience. The word spread, and more students want to take the class now next semester. I don't know if I could teach it next semester, but I'm definitely doing it again in the summer again. So this looks like a thing that at least every summer now in the Rutgers Business School for the master's MBA students will be using, as long as you guys will allow us the Okteto accounts to create these, to do these projects. It was fantastic.
That is really cool, and we're happy to be partner with you on this. I think that what you're doing around like teaching students the skills that they're going to need in the real world on its own is like super valuable. When I went to school, I remember, and I was studying software engineering, we were taught all these like very theoretical things that once you get to the field, you're like, okay, that was cool, but that has nothing to do with like reality. And your students are going to be dealing with data. That's really cool. I have to be, I was very surprised with like the kind of like your decision to use Fast API. I know it's growing, and I know that Abdul is a big fan and expert. But that was really cool. Um, from your students' perspective, how was their kind of like reaction to all this technology? Were they used to? I mean, you mentioned they already knew Python, but were they familiar with things like databases, web services, dashboards, all these things, or was it like from zero?
So databases, they do take an SQL class. So there's three things we like our MBA analytics and master students to have on their resume: SQL, R, and Python when they graduate, even if they never work with it, right? Even if they go and work with Tableau or whatever, we like them to have those three skill sets, right? So they were familiar with SQL. They never set up the databases, right? Oh, but they did create database tables here and there. And they obviously were familiar with Python. In terms of web infrastructure, unless they worked at it at work or an internship, most of these students had no clue how this worked, right? They had no clue. This is how you go on a website. This is what's basically happening. They had an idea that, look, it has to be stored somewhere,
right?
But in terms of infrastructure, I mean, these guys are not, especially the MBAs, they're not IT. This was their first time diving in something so technical, right? This is the first time diving in something so technical. So my fear was, would they be able to handle? First of all, would I be able to handle it? And this was the first time I was doing Fast API, so I was very nervous as well. But if you read the literature, everyone's talking about, listen, don't stop doing Flask, do Fast API. That's why I keep reading. Even though Flask, if you want to do dashboards, Flask has something called Dash, it's pre-built, and it's all this stuff. In fact, I use one of the graphing tools from it. I use Plotly to do our graphing, which is, I'm sure that Python has a bunch of stuff that allows us to do HTML stuff. But anyway, this is the first time they were exposed to this. And so for them to wrap their heads around it, it was a little weird at first, but I think the fact that Okteto set up the account, it set up the development environment right there for them, right? You know how the way Okteto has set up how you guys have the development environment where we can do the Okteto up and do the development. So even remember at first I was emailing you, I'm like, Ramiro, what's going on here? I was totally lost myself, right? I was like, right? And then you're like, yeah, just that's your development environment, right? And I got it. And then you said use GitHub, right? That's when the light bulb went off in my head, like, oh, okay, I see what's going on here now, right? So when they did, first they did it in their development environment, and then they finally loaded up in GitHub. And again, for a lot of these students, first time using GitHub. Concept of like storing your program up in
interesting. That was my other question on their expertise or exposure to tools like GitHub.
Yeah, so I mean, again, like for our comp sci students, they use GitHub. Like freshman year, you open your GitHub account, all your code goes there, right? But again, on the business side, why would these guys ever use GitHub? You know what I mean? So this is the first time I opened GitHub. So again, with GitHub, we just downloaded the desktop GUIs, right? And it's just simply just a click of a button, boom, boom, boom. And then you go to Okteto, click of a button, boom, boom, boom. So once again, it's all about repetition. Once they did it 2-3 times, that whole ecosystem, they go in. We use the Atom IDE, by the way, with the Atom IDE, which synced up perfectly with GitHub. And so they went in, they wrote the code, they went in Okteto, they ran the server. Abdul Aziz, just so you set it up, right? Python main.py, the URL comes up, they open up the URL, they see what they want to see. It's cool. They simply go into their GitHub desktop, they upload it. It's all there already. It's already telling you what you changed and what needs to be updated. Boom, click a button. You go into Okteto, all you do, you click a button and get it from GitHub. And they're like, all we do is click a button. I'm like, go ahead, click the button. They click the button, it all wakes up, and then they run they have the URL right there in production. They click on production, and what they had in their development environment, again on their laptop, even they did it via their laptop, was there in production. So for those guys, right, it was like, wow, this is incredibly easier than we ever thought it was. And I feel as though it's cheated a little bit because, and I think you guys did a great job here because they use your Okteto system. And I told them, guys, it's never this easy.
It's true. No, that is one of the reasons why we're doing this. It's I think you said it already, where like there's this new class of developers, which and you're a developer and your students are developers now, where they don't care about infrastructure, they don't care about cloud, and they shouldn't, right? Like for us, kind of give all these users the tools so that they just, hey, write some code, press a button, it's there. You can see the results, you can share it. You don't have to depend on your local machine. As you said, the cloud is now the limit, right? You have all these resources you can now use as you're building this software solutions, dashboards, whatever it is. That for us is really cool. So when you approach us, I was kind of nervous, like, hey, will our abstractions be good enough for your students?
I was nervous too.
But it was. I'm really glad we went through it, because it sounds like it was a success. It sounds like the students kind of got the value, which for me was the main thing. It was like, I hope they don't find it too like the interface is not too clunky for them. But I'm glad that they saw this value, which is great.
No, I think the opposite happened. I think they feel I think they have a misunderstanding that it's much easier than it really is outside of the Okteto ecosystem, right? So I just gave them a heads up. I'm like, look, guys, if you guys go to work, don't think it's going to be that straightforward. Oh, although these guys should probably champion. I told them, but if you like Okteto, you guys should obviously champion Okteto, depending where they go, where they end up, right? Obviously, but I love the experience, and they love the experience.
Yeah,
right.
I think that's the important part. I think there's a new class of tools, and we're part of it. We're not the only ones doing this kind of like better dev experience. Like that entire day they're organizing on this conference called DevX Day is all focused on this. Is how there's this whole concept now of how to make software more inclusive, to kind of like remove all these blockers that, hey, you need to have a comp sci degree to be able to deploy an application like on Amazon. Like that should not be the case, especially now that we have people join the workforce from so many different backgrounds. Like MBAs writing dashboards is something that, okay, who would have guessed this like 10 years ago? And thanks to the good work of like you and Rutgers and other schools, this is now reality. So now us who are building software, we have to catch up and make sure that these users can harness the power of what we're building without having to, go through like hours and hours of training, which is what used to happen before.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, the only reason I think it worked is because of the fact how accessible this world was to be Okteto, right? 2 configuration files, you're up. That's ridiculous.
That's good to hear. That is what we work hard on this. We would be amazed how many hours of discussions we've had on like trying to get to this experience. So it's always nice to hear from our users that, hey, we're benefiting from it. That's why we do it. For me, building software is always, hey, if someone's using it, like, yes, it's exciting. And what's really exciting is that you actually, Abdul's been spending a lot of time building content around Fast API. He's now doing a video series as well. So it's really cool that you find that useful.
I'll check it out. I'll check out all the Fast API resources you have, because I think I'm all in on Fast API now.
It's really cool. I learned of it through Abdul, and yeah, I used to be a Flask, kind of like big fan of Flask.
I did Flask development too. I love Flask.
I'm a big fan, but now it's like, okay, that's the old thing. Now I have to get into like the new thing, which is the new hot thing is Fast API.
I mean, what really swung me on Fast API was just the fact that you can do a synchronous style development, which makes it almost as fast as the JSON. Node.js,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
it's so fast.
Once people are saying that it's so fast, I mean, it's like a no-brainer at that point. Like any kind of web application you want to develop, if it's the same amount of work, why not? Right. If it's the same amount of work, virtually, I think around the same kind of syntax. I feel Fast API they cleaned up a lot of the syntax as well, right? It's why wouldn't we at this point?
No, yeah, I mean, unless you want to do it from academic reasons for learning, but yeah, like why? I think the world of picking the harder stuff is gone. It's like we need to be effective. We need to, like, coding is what you do to get a result. It's not the result on its own. It's like, hey, I need to have this service running because I need to display the dashboard. The dashboard is what matters, not what you're using to get it there. And people should pick whatever is the best tool that's available to you. And I think Fast API is one of the top ones right now.
That's cool. Also, Python's everywhere. So at this point, I think, right.
That part I'm really surprised because kind of in our world, kind of more in the infrastructure side, everyone talks about Python as like, yeah, that's the old thing. And, there's all these new languages, Go, Rust, now this other language, Julia, is starting to gain a lot of prominence. But then you look at other parts of the world, like, oh, no, Python is the rage. So it's always cool to talk to people in other industries and kind of like see their take on all of these things.
Yeah, no, I've had some data scientists say, "Hey, why aren't you guys into Julius or Rust because it's pre-compiled? I think it's supposed to be faster." And I'm like, look, at this point, I don't think businesses are doing it. That's basically what it comes down to, right? What are the people at work actually doing? That's what it always comes down to.
Yeah, of course. And in your case, I guess also making sure your students have like the right skills for when they join the workforce. Because if they're experts on a tool that no one uses, like Julia, and there's no company building things in Julia, it might be at their disadvantage when they start, go for that first job.
Yeah. Also, the thing is, it's also the perception. Remember, HR always does the hiring anyway.
Yeah.
So it's the perception of HR as to, oh, what signals that this person has the capabilities for a job. If the HR person has no concept with Julia or Rust,
yeah,
right. But they do have HR does have a list of buzzwords, right? We understand how the business is, right? So those buzzwords, it's sad, but you try to game
matching, right? Yeah.
You try to game the situation a little bit, right?
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that's part of the reality of hiring. It's not just technical people are not the ones doing at least the first touch, and that's where like knowing the right skills and putting them on your resume makes a big difference. Awesome. What do you think, Abdul? Any questions? I mean, you are the Fast API expert in the company, so I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
I think I'm quite impressed that Waj likes Fast API. I mean, Fast API is very fast, like you said. I like that we can do asynchronous and synchronous programming depending on which you like. And so I think you use for data analysis and so what's I like ask people. When using Okteto, you use the dev environment, which is our number one feature. Have you tried other features? You like other features? So far, apart from dev environments, have you checked the preview environments? Which do you think?
So I haven't checked out your more advanced features yet. I have to be totally honest, right? But I do look forward because I know you guys are coming out with tons of other features, and like I haven't used the cron job yet. Even though that's not considered advanced for you guys, I know. You guys have other cool things. So I haven't gotten to more advanced stuff, but I'm going to start now building and Ramiro, I'll talk to you probably after about this, a new web application development. This kind of goes to tie what we talked about before about taking what I'm teaching and now making it accessible to PhD students that want to store their data in a platform like Okteto for dissertation purposes, right? So we'll talk a little bit later about that, but I want to do like I'm doing more web application development. I'm looking forward to doing it now that my new account. And there I'm going to start looking at your tutorials to see the more advanced features. I haven't, totally honest, I haven't checked out your more advanced stuff yet.
Well, that's where Abdul's new video series, I think it's exactly on that. It's like, hey, how to build a fast API application with Okteto. I think that'll be a good one for you to kind of like walk through and say and start seeing more other features we have, which I think might be come in handy. As Abdul mentioned, preview environment, something that people really like now, especially if you're going to be working on a team, secret management, just a bunch of other things there that they might make your life easier, which is at the end of the day why we do all these things.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and since they work with data, it's features like continuous deployment, work as you load data sets and make changes. Okteto automatically deploys, and you can see changes. So yes, like I said, the video series is going to be a very good help. I'm glad you like Fast API, and I think Fast API and Okteto is like the perfect combination, if you ask me. I'm totally biased, but yes, Fast API and Okteto is like really good.
Well, I mean, a lot of the other stuff I see now happening, like when I talk about building, I've seen other articles coming out now, the building machine learning applications or quantitative data applications. They're all doing it now in Fast API. So I think it is catching on now.
Yeah, it's a very popular framework for deploying machine learning models and learning algorithms because of its speed, and it's very simple. It's a lightweight framework and has that much speed. So yes, and it has inbuilt, you could create models, you could define how your application should respond. I think it's just a definition of small but mighty because it's very light, but has this very large speed as compared to like maybe Django and Flask. And I think it's a favorite tool for machine learning algorithm deployment. It's one aspect that I think everyone should look into. As I was going to ask, since you work with data, like what are your performance speed with Okteto? We know Okteto is fast, the dev environment comes in handy. Have you gotten into any issue using the dev environments with your tools or your applications?
Okay, so I think the only issue we once had was, I think one of the students, they were seeing something in development, but it was something different in production. And I think something they just had to refresh something along those lines. I think I emailed you, Ramiro, and you said, yeah, have them redeploy it in GitHub, and it was fine. I think that's once or twice we had a situation like that where something was in development, they saw it, and when they posted it in production, it didn't look as fine. But I think they just had to refresh or rewake their account.
Sounds like maybe running stack build, maybe building new image instead of just deploying.
Yeah, I mean, they were still on this line. But in terms of speed, right, because then we're doing data. And obviously when you're talking with data, there's different tricks or algorithms we can use to speed things up. Like a lot of times, even if you're using machine learning, a little trick that everybody has is that run your machine learning algorithms a few hours before and just have your results there so you can show people results. If you don't need to have machine learning algorithms run live, then process them overnight or something along those lines. So, I mean, aside from those tricks, the data we were processing, it seemed very fast, right? Getting the data, crunching the data, the calculations. We were actually using, so to slice and dice the data we were using, what we were doing is we were calling the data, we were calling from SQL Alchemy, converting the SQL Alchemy objects into Pandas data frames, right? So from Pandas data frames, once we had these Pandas data frames, that basically were an abstraction of the data from the database, right? Whatever data we wanted, maybe all the data from the database. We obviously, because my students were taught before in a different class how to use Pandas data frames to do analysis. So using those Pandas data frames, then boom, we just sliced and diced the data we wanted and simply presented it and just sent the whatever the data sets to the HTML page. Then that would then graph or do whatever we wanted to it, and it was seamless. Like there wasn't really any delay in the amount of data in what we were doing analysis wise. I'll load up more data, test it up some more, hammer it a little more, but I mean it was very pretty fast and instant.
Cool. And I think the feature I'd like you to try out at your free time is the data cloning feature, since you happen to work most times in a team and you work with data, so it's easy to share your data with data cloning. I demonstrated it in the last community call, and there's a video also. So yes, I think it's pretty amazing. I'm glad you're using this for master's students and for students itself, which is really good. As always, at Okteto, they say great developers are lazy developers. So we are here to make sure the process is effortlessly simple and straightforward. So yeah, thank you, Waj.
Thank you, Abdulaziz.
That's really cool, Waj. Thank you so much for joining us. And feel free to stick around. Now Abdul's gonna kind of walk us through one of our new features. But before Abdul starts, once again, thanks so much. It's very exciting. I'm looking forward to hear about your new ventures and all the new stuff you're planning, and we'll definitely should talk and see how we can improve the experience of Okteto for yourself and for your students the next time they go around. We'd love to have them in Okteto next summer.
Thank you, Ramiro. Thank you, Abdulaziz.
You're welcome.
All right, Abdul, now the moment for the new features has arrived.
Yes. Well, primarily, the dev environment, which I think virtually everyone has used. If you're using Okteto, if you haven't, you should try that. Is being able to, go into your deployments and develop your deployments from there. You can troubleshoot. You can check your files and synchronize automatically. It's one of the features we take pride in, because remote dev environments is really the hot cake in this century, like in this modern system of web development and software itself. So recent, we just made a new feature, and it's you being able to work into your StatefulSets, such as maybe your MongoDB deployments, your MySQL, or even applications that are deployed as StatefulSets. So now, if I have an application, say a MongoDB application and Python FastAPI application, obviously, that is deployed on Okteto, and although I can use my dev environment to work in the API service itself. But what if I have an issue with my database and I need to like maybe check, I want to synchronize some files I have locally. I want to like maybe change some command. In some situations, your database folders or volumes are locked, or there's an issue. Maybe there's data corruption or volume corruption, or you like to make file local backups instead of having to maybe backup on cloud. You like to maybe get your deployments offline and check. We now have Okteto up for StatefulSets. And so I have this application here. I have two services. I have the API service and the MongoDB service. The MongoDB is responsible for holding and processing all my database operations, running, creating, updating. And so in the past, there are some situations you have to check. Is your volume healthy? Okay. You have an error of, like I mentioned earlier, maybe some folders are locked and you need to make changes. How do you do all this? And so the first step is to deploy my application to my Okteto cluster. And so I am currently deploying my stack, and I can currently using, and now this is going to be and now I'm in my cluster and I have my stack is currently being deployed. I have a deployment and a stateful set. Primarily, I can run Okteto up into my deployments and build my applications remotely, because that is what Okteto is for. It's for remote developments, building applications without having to run Docker. As you can see in my manifest here, I have a Docker Compose manifest, but to deploy to Okteto, I do not have to use Docker Compose or anything. So it totally eliminates the need for Docker and Docker Compose, making it easier. And now I have my application running. And I can confirm that this is working. My endpoints, which is automatically generated, shows that yes, hello from Okteto Developer community. And I could decide, to maybe add a few items. Let me try this out. And I have some couple of data. I'm just going to have to create another one. Okay. But then I want to check. Indeed, I can see from the logs that yes, I have some, operations going on, and my MongoDB seems to take some changes and something is happening. But I want to confirm, is this really working? Do I really have this data? And in case you need to run diagnostics for your, MongoDB, and you're unable to do this because you cannot access your stateful sets, you can now do that by running Okteto up. And now when you run Okteto up does not only list the current deployments you have. Now it checks for the stateful sets that you have also. And so the first step when you run Okteto up is to create a manifest, which I'm going to create here. And as you can see, I have my deployment API and I have my stateful sets. So now I'm going to work on my stateful sets, which is MongoDB application stateful deployed. And when I click on MongoDB, it analyzes it. By analyzing the MongoDB stateful set, it's checks what kind of application is deployed, what stateful is deployed, is it MySQL, is it MongoDB, what are the tools needed? Because normally when you're working with MongoDB, you need to have Mongod, that's a shell, have other tools installed. One of the benefits of using Okteto Dev environment again is you do not have to pre-install or install all these tools in your development environment. Everything comes pre-installed. And now we have our manifest file, and it says this is the name or command bash. That is every command I'm currently running on my terminal, such as ls, cat, maybe so everything works there. And now we have the synchronization heading. Like everything that works in Okteto is automatically synchronized. That is the main essence of you having a development environment. For you to be able to synchronize your changes and see them in a what you see is what you get fashion. And so when I check my Docker Compose manifest, I can see where my data is stored in this folder. So I'm going to change where this is synchronized to here. And although that's, we have the ports, which is MongoDB ports and a reverse ports. And so now I want to activate my development environment for my stateful sets. And now, so I finally run Okteto up. Is already defined. Okay, we could just do this. Okay. Let's see if this works. This is not spotted. Okay, so we could have this should be Bitnami. And now when you run Okteto up, a development container is created and a persistent volume. That is, whatever changes you make, you can always go back. That is the main essence of having a remote development environment. That is, when you make changes in developments, your changes are not lost. You can always come back to check these changes and to locate. Okay, at this point in time, I was developing. I had to close. Everything is automatically saved for you. And while this is working, you can go back to your cluster and you can see a new development volume has been created. This is just to ensure that changes in production and that in development are totally isolated. So whatever changes you make in development mode does not affect that which you have in production. And we're waiting for this. So you can see from the logs, we are currently waiting for MongoDB to totally, oh, cool, nice running. And as you can see here, we are synchronizing our files. Images has been successfully pulled. One of the amazing features I think is not talked about enough is Okteto synchronization. Having to synchronize your file without having to upload them, and my files remain local and I can make changes and I can see them in my development environment. I think it's an amazing feature, if you agree with me. Okay, so we wait for our files to get synchronized.
Check the stignore file, Abdul. You might be synchronizing the entire virtual environment folder.
Oh, we have an stignore file.
Oh no, there it is. Never mind. Yes, but
okay, cool. Instead of just a database, yes, that's true. That is why you can always go back and change it to a specific folder. So if I wanted to change this to something else, I could just mirror, or should I say reduce the scope of what is synchronized. Thank you for that, Ramiro. That is also one of the use cases of your manifest. It's not stagnant. You can always change it and update it. And your development environment, is redeployed with these changes you made. And now, so we are going to find where our data is stored. So first, we want to see what's listed. So we go to Bitnami. And we can see, like Ramiro said, everything here is synchronized. But we are interested in going to the MongoDB database folder where we have here, we have nothing. Okay, so we have, this is Bitnami. We should be having MongoDB. We are supposed to have here, let me check. In our manifest file, probably there's something missing. Bitnami MongoDB. Ideally, we should have a folder data. Perhaps I might have to
yeah, I think what happened is that if you overwrite the Bitnami folder, that's telling Okteto that you want to replace everything on that folder with your file system. So I think maybe instead of synchronizing Bitnami,
we could synchronize.
We should synchronize some other folder. Let's do /Okteto maybe. Nope. And that will give you the code.
I think it's a perfect use case. So on my local machine here, I have MongoDB installed and I have everything located at.
I see what you're doing. That's cool.
Let's see, we have homebrew for MongoDB and I have a couple of data. And so now I could update my synchronization, okay, change everything we have from here, like MongoDB to Bitnami MongoDB data DB, for example. And now I can just reactivate. First, I deactivate my development container so we can have these changes affected. And again, I'm going to create a new development environment instance. So like I mentioned, when you make these changes in synchronization heading, it means you're overwriting whatever you have in that particular volume folder remotely, what you have in your cluster, you are telling Okteto to change it to what you have locally. This is why when using remote development for even deployment, it's particularly useful because your changes that are made locally are the ones that are going to be reflected there. Cool, thanks. And so wait for development container to get loaded. All this is working. I'd like to reiterate particular use cases for these stateful sets. Like I mentioned earlier, it's particularly useful for situations where you have maybe data corruption or you need to check something is wrong with your database deployment. Although stateful sets is not limited to only databases. You could have standalone applications which are deployed as stateful sets instead of a deployment. So using your stateful sets is important. One of the main considerations I think might have gone into this is debugging, database issues. At some point you may need to run some command, maybe migrate, do some changes, you want to locally transfer files, you want to, we talked about data cloning in the last community call, which is basically from Okteto to Okteto, but you might prefer the local one and you don't have an idea of how to dump your database from Okteto. This is a very good use case because you can just simply copy everything you need here and put it in your local directory and you have your application. So let's go back to C and we can see this is okay. So we're going to wait. We have a timeout, and so we have to let's run this once again. Okay. While it's working, have you tried using the stateful sets Okteto feature?
I also muted. I have used it. The other day we were troubleshooting internally an issue we were having with BuildKit, which is the open source project that powers our build service. And BuildKit is a StatefulSets. And it was a very similar use case to what you're saying, where we needed to troubleshoot, check like some data, where was it being placed. We have some scripts that clean up the data when the container restarts. And that was not working well. So we use this feature to do that. So we do Okteto up into our BuildKit pods in our dev environment. And we were able to validate that, hey, the scripts are working. We had a bug in like some of the permissions we were applying. And honestly, without the support for StatefulSets on Okteto, it would have taken a long, long time to be able to solve this problem. That's something where, like being able to Okteto up to now deployments and StatefulSets on Kubernetes, it makes things easier. So I do like it. I think we have a couple of people in our community who requested this feature. We're also using it for their own applications. So it's definitely something that is going to be very useful, especially as our features evolve and as we are support for more type of like Kubernetes and Docker Compose resources.
Cool. I think one very particular use case again is having to upload your database from your local machine, to your dev environment.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I never thought about that one. That's a very interesting use case. And I like how you're using that feature that Sync has, where you can synchronize specific folders, even outside of your local directory. That's a pretty cool feature.
Yep, because we are totally eliminating the need for intermediaries. So if I have developed my application so far locally and I'm a new customer to Okteto, I don't have to worry about having to push these changes. How do I upload existing data that I have? So I think it's a very thoughtful feature. And okay, cool. So now we are back.
Nice. That's it.
Let's see. Okay.
Oh, there it is.
Okay. And now we can see.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we can, check, like I said, Bash is supported. That's all the commands I've run is Bash. So I have the diagnostic.data, I have folders, I have, some configurations. So how do I check? I'm curious. Are these data were represented? Do I have anything stored? How do I confirm? And of course, this is almost machine readable code. I'm going to say, I want to check collection 7. What do we have? I can see that I have some data represented,
That's really cool.
which is particularly interesting.
I didn't know you could
Right.
read like a MongoDB database files. That's nice.
Exactly. So, it's easy for us to like check. And I think everyone should do as the data I have says. You should try Okteto. It's very important. And so, you could, I could decide to dump this data, synchronize and make local backups. And I can see, okay, what else I want to go to? I can go to journal. I have like my logs and everything. At what point did my application fail? I could decide to just synchronize like I did now. If I have a local version and a whatever version, I just quickly swap it up. And when I'm done making changes, I do my auto stack deploy build and I have everything up and running. I think this is one feature that I am also going to record a standalone video for. I think there's a lot of more interesting things one can do than just reading the database itself.
Yeah.
I think it's particularly useful for people who use like SQL, for example, because you have migrations and all these using of databases. Instead of having to run all this at the point of deployment, you can just do this at development. Since Okteto is for developing itself. Does this look like a feature you're going to use in the future, Waj?
I will definitely use it. Yes.
Sorry, I was muted. I think it's a feature that I probably would have to use. I mean, depending on the complexity of the application, right? When you're trying to debug it, but I think it's something I might have to use. I'm looking through it. I'm like, this comes in very handy when you're debugging, especially with data-driven applications, right? So, I mean, it's very interesting.
Yep, I agree.
Very cool.
We have people who use data in mind. That's like I could check metrics, which is just one I have locally, and I could see all of these junks, which is machine readable code. But it's one way to offload whatever I have online and offline when I have maybe wrong databases, permissions, or folders, but there's no persistency. It just creates it for my dev environment. When I'm done making these changes, as always, I could just run Okteto dev, Okteto stack deploy. And like you said, in a sec, everything is deployed. And I feel like there's a lot of potential for this feature. I personally am going to play with this for a while. I'm excited to see how we can use this and how you can use this and other viewers and customers use this feature. Cool.
This is very cool.
This is not just limited to maybe Docker Compose applications. I also have, say, I have maybe a Kubernetes an application here. I have a StatefulSets. I don't know if this is. So I have a StatefulSets, just a basic web application itself. Like I said, StatefulSets is not limited to just databases itself. It could be standalone web applications. So I have the StatefulSets and I deploy it and I want to make changes, but it's a StatefulSet. How do I do that? But now that we can do that, I can make these changes by synchronizing files and folders. And when I'm done, the same command pushes everything and, everything fall back in order. And I think it's really amazing. Yeah. So just to recap, StatefulSets feature, running Okteto up for StatefulSets is the newest and latest feature, which I'm glad we have. I think so far this quarter, we've been working more on data. We, introduced data cloning itself. And now we have Okteto up for StatefulSets, which is particularly for people running databases. And we also unveiled a new preview environment section. So, of course, I would like to say stay tuned for what we are going to release for the last quarter of the year. It's always going to be amazing. We'd like to be in suspense. I'm sure Ramiro has a lot of things planned, and you can only find out if you watch the community call. And so the first API series should be shooting from next month. So I think I'm confident enough to have Waj as one of the viewers who's going to watch that series.
Definitely. Thanks for this demo, Abdul. It was really interesting, really cool. I love when I learned from you and the community calls, because this is a use case I hadn't thought about. And it's very interesting how to sync data from local machines, troubleshoot all these files with my databases. This is pretty cool. And it's one more thing now you can do with Okteto.
Yes.
It's perfect. Well, and as a reminder to everyone, as Abdul said, please check out our YouTube channel. Go to YouTube, Okteto. And if you like, our content, don't forget to subscribe. That way you'll get notifications as soon as our new content is available. We publish new videos on everything Okteto on a weekly basis. And very soon, if you subscribe, you'll have access to Abdul's new series on Fast API. Wash, Abdul, thanks so much to both of you for joining us on this community call. This was very interesting. I love learning about both the use case around like your school, your class at Rutgers, and then Abdul's use case for databases. So thanks so much for both of you. And everyone who's watching this video, thank you for watching us. Thank you for supporting us. Don't forget, we do this every month. So join us here next month. But before that, I really hope to see you at CubeCon. I'll be there in LA, roaming the halls, talking to people. Jacob will also be there. And remember to check out DevX Day on October 12th, where Jacob and I will be giving a couple of talks on preview environments and moving your development to your cluster. So that's gonna be exciting. Hopefully we'll see you there. But if not, I'll see you online. Abdul,
Yes,
thank you for your time. It's good seeing
Thank you
you.
for having me, guys.
It's important that you star our repository too on GitHub. Get us to
Very
2,000 stars.
important. Yes, we're about to hit 2,000 stars. So go to github.com/Okteto and star our project. Is something it helps know that you find it valuable. It helps us kind of like keep us motivated, and it's also a cool way to show support. So please go ahead, do it. And until our next call, I'm Ramiro, and thank you so much for joining us. Bye.
Bye.